I am not. I am. I am calm this week because everyone else is panicking, and I'm relaxed. I'm going to go get these players that everyone's panicking on, that I am pretty confident will still be good players in the NFL.
You are calm. We got calm Christian out here. What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show. Today, we're going to be examining week 5 of the fantasy football season, talking about trends, values, all of the above. But first, we got to get into the return of Cooper Kupp. He's coming back, maybe, kind of, where he's going to get probably a low work it. I don't know what his volume and his target's going to be, but he's back. And I think everybody's talking about Puka Nacua right now and what that means for him, right? So the Rams have talked about, like, hey, they want Cooper back at 80-90% healthy. It looks like he's going that way. Puka's been great. You've seen him be that. He's a top 5 wide receiver. And what does this mean for that target share? Who, are we worried about Puka coming out? A lot of people in Dynasty have been trading him for like Jaxon, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, straight up. Like that has happened in leagues. So where are we at with this? Jeff, how concerned are you with Cooper Kupp coming back? What can we expect these first few weeks back? And can those two kind of coexist in this offense?
Well, in my mind, I have one expectation that Cooper Kupp is going to step back in and be Cooper Kupp and be that dominant target share that's going to be the first option that Matthew Stafford looks for on most every single play. But then, I was watching, like, obviously last week's game, Puka had the game-winning touchdown, and then in the locker room, Sean McVay's he was doing press, and then there was this video of him running through the hall while the whole team was kind of waiting on him to get into the room, and everybody mobbed him when he got in there, and it just feels like he has become such a centerpiece of, like, just personality wise and just kind of like just this major piece of the team, and seeing that makes me think that he's going to be heavily involved still along with Cooper Kupp. And I think that there's more than enough. We've seen plenty of offenses. I mean, you look at Philadelphia's offense and the way that they hyper target AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. Well, they're not throwing the ball nearly as much as the Rams potentially be throwing the ball. And so if the Rams get into a situation where they're really hyper targeting Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, I mean, there's going to be enough for substantiation moving forward. One of my concerns is that we haven't seen a lot of big plays down the field from Puka Nacua. The area of the field that he operates in is kind of the same area of the field as Cooper Kupp. And so I'm a bit concerned about that, but I do trust Sean McVay's ability to work them in different areas of the field to get them into different situations to open up. So there's two different scenarios here where there's Cooper Kupp is Cooper Kupp, and Puka Nacua maintains a lot of what he's doing now, and that's where the targets go in this offense. Yeah. The other scenario would be, I don't see Cooper Kupp massively pulling back once he's completely healthy, because he's been such a centerpiece, and I mean, he should have been the MVP of the NFL 2 years ago, basically. But the other alternative would be Tutu Atwell still being involved, Tyler Higbee still siphoning off some targets, the running back position still siphoning off some targets. And if that's the case, then I don't think that Puka Nacua is going to be able to deliver at some of the valuations that he's got placed at.
I think that's the key point. So Puka has been largely working outside. I think him and Tutu really have kind of operated from the outside because of the creativity of this offense and things like that. Cooper Kupp primarily operates from the slot. So I do think, those are going to be the primary two targets in this offense. Now, we saw for a couple of weeks that Matthew Stafford can sustain two high-end wide receivers. There was a moment where Tutu was, literally a pinky toe away from outscoring Puka Nacua over a couple of weeks span. Do I think that Puka's target share, I want to be clear, Puka's target share is going away. It's not going to be that high once Cooper Kupp is back. That's not going to happen. But I think you can still expect, wide receiver 2 weeks. I think you could see some boom weeks. Cooper Kupp is still going to be the number one in this offense. Now, until Kupp is fully healthy, I think maybe he's that decoy type of player where you can get some extended run from Puka. But from a dynasty perspective, I think you have to understand that, what Puka has done through these first few weeks, I don't think is going to be the outcome here by the end of the season. I think he'll come back down to earth. Now, I'm not saying that he's worthless or anything like that, But I do think that we're going to talk about him in the trade segment here. And I think I saw a poll today. It was, who would you rather? I think, Kevin, did you put this out? Puka Nacua or Jaxon Smith-Njigba? Was that you? Yeah.
Well,
And
it was like 17 different people, but I kind of did it first.
Okay, cool. What do you know the results off the top of your head?
It was
Did you see?
53%, over almost 7,000 people voted. 53% picked Puka.
Yeah. See, like, I understand. I understand based on the first 4 weeks, and I understand that that's a larger sample size, but that's crazy to me from where we were a few weeks ago. So.
Yeah, I think, Kyle Lindemann tweeted this out today. I thought it was important to note, like, they could work well together in terms of like where they're lining up. Nakua's 69% of his routes lined up wide, where Kupp had 65% of his routes from the slot the last 2 years. So there is that. The Rams run a lot of 11 personnel as well. They're like the second highest in the league. So they can do that. I think my biggest concern is Stafford's health. He got banged up in that game. He has a hip contusion, it looked like. And like, if he's hurt, I mean, do you guys have a lot of faith in their backup quarterback situation and Stetson Bennett? Like, do you think that he definitely can't, look at and have those guys be fantasy relevant? Both of those guys, and Kupp would definitely kind of smash that. So I think it's something to know to watch Stafford's health, which is always borderline. Like, Stafford's a stud. We know that he stays in there, but if he does miss some time, we could see definitely a drop in their fantasy production there as well. Cooper back in the mix. I mean, Atwell's probably going to decline as well. I think the meaningful numbers there. If Williams' role does change though, and you see that, I mean, he's kind of that running back one-ish, right? Like, we're seeing what he does, and if you give him more targets there, I think the target share go down. I think he's getting overvalued for what he is. I do think that. And that doesn't mean he's not producing. It doesn't mean that. I think that he is. And I think that, but I think you can get really high return on Puka right now. And I think that if you're in a position to do that as a dynasty team, which you should be because you probably got him in the third and fourth round, I think you have to go after that value and go get some guys that are elite talent. There's only so many elite talent guys. People are comparing Puka to Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I don't know. I think that they're interesting similarities, but I will say Amon-Ra St. Brown was a way better college prospect coming out, and he was a much refined player than Puka was coming out. So I don't think from a prospect perspective, I think then we talked about last week how we talked about how it's changing and, hey, he's getting opportunities and all that. So I think there's a bit of a nuance in all of that, but I would sell if I could get elite players like we'll mention later. All right. Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, no, I think that I look at Robert Woods, and if you look at Cooper Kupp's early career and Robert Woods, they were both kind of flirting fringe wide receiver one territory there for a while, and so that's kind of where my expectation would be. I don't know if you're going to get Cooper Kupp being that number one wide receiver, number one overall wide receiver, because that's what he was last year before he was injured. He was the number one wide receiver overall, and as much as Justin Jefferson has taken that over, I mean, Cooper Kupp was there for a solid half a season last year and the entire year before that. And so I don't know if you're going to get that Cooper Kupp, but I think that there's enough where Puka Nacua can operate in a lot of those areas of the field that Robert Woods did when he was with Cooper Kupp, while Cooper Kupp was in the slot. I'm less concerned about where they start from, who starts inside, who starts outside. It's more what the area of the field that they go into. But I think that Rams passing attack is going to be that quick timing passing attack, which I do think that plays into both of their games, with Tutu Atwell kind of being the deep threat, threatening the field downfield. And I think Van Jefferson is going to be the odd man out.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. So before we move on to the next topics as we go through here, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss an episode, comment below with any questions that you have or trades or thoughts on any topic.
Also, make sure to head to footballguys.com/plans to become a premium subscriber. Elite subscribers get custom Dynasty content for less than $15 monthly or $70 annually. We have the best Dynasty content in the fantasy football industry. Join today.
All right. I wanted to start this with like a guess who's back, but that would have really aged me a little bit. But we got Jonathan Taylor coming back from, I don't know, an exodus that he had. I guess injury, whatever the case may be, that he came up with. But he could have a chance to play Sunday. That's what Shane Steichen said on the recent Athletic article that they went out. I think it's interesting because I do think he's still a buy. Like just going through some of the trades and trade value on Fantasy Calc and other areas. If you're a contender and you've lost any of these running backs, Chubb or any of these running backs to injuries, Dobbins, these other guys, and you've been able to piece it together with Mostert or whoever, Devin Chan or some of these guys that maybe you just been able to plug and play, JT feels like someone that you could go out and grab. And, he fits this offense well. I think that they're excited to have him back in here. Zach Moss has had a resurgence a little bit. He's averaging almost 93 yards over his last 3 games. He had 22 carries, which I still think he will be in the mix a little bit. But if you just sit there and say, hey, imagine giving, Taylor those carries and that usage, you're talking about running back 1 with his talent on this team and this offense that we've seen have potential out of that position. So I like Taylor. I think he's a buy in Dynasty. I've studied that for like the last few weeks. Where are you leaning with Jonathan Taylor coming back, Jeff?
No, I agree. And I think that I look at the usage. I don't expect Zach Moss to be overly involved if Taylor's fully back. I think that they kind of shown what that offense is. I mean, they weren't really involving a second back through the first 4 weeks. And so if you're putting Jonathan Taylor in there, I don't think you're going to go out of your way to involve Zach Moss. But I do think that it's kind of one of those things where Jonathan Taylor can have so much of the workload, and then Anthony Richardson takes a share of the rushing workload. You don't need that committee if you're kind of going with that direction. And so, but you're exactly right. Him getting that volume, and you look at the Colts offense as a whole, that raises the ceiling. It's going to be more efficiency on what Zach Moss was doing, which means more plays, more scoring opportunities, and that helps everybody just in general. And so, and plus it focuses defensive attention in a different direction, focuses that defensive direction attention towards Jonathan Taylor, potentially opening up Michael Pittman. We saw Michael Pittman have a strong week 1. I think he's struggled a little bit after that, because I think the expectation in week 1 was that Anthony Richardson wouldn't be able to get in the ball. And so I think that defensive attention in week 1 went from the Jacksonville Jaguars, went a little bit different directions. And now they've kind of realized, okay, this guy can throw it downfield. And so I think Pittman has struggled with that increased attention instead of defenses just kind of worrying about the run game off Richardson. And so offense is a symbiotic relationship. And as you get better at running back, you're going to get better at other areas and things are going to look better. And so I think that as long as he's Jonathan Taylor, as long as the expectation is there, the rub is that he struggled last year. He was not Jonathan Taylor last year when he did play. And we've seen in the past that these guys that have these massive seasons, like he did in the 2021 season, to have that 2,000-yard year, that takes a toll on guys, and sometimes guys are never the same off of that. So that's the one caveat on it, that he can get back to that performance level. But assuming he does, I mean, he's going to shift leagues now.
I think the introduction of Anthony Richardson and Shane Steichen kind of fix that problem, though. I think that Frank Reich offense, we have hard proof now that it's just not very good. That's a conversation for a different day.
Free Bryce Young.
It's rough out there. But so Zach Moss right now, RB11 in fantasy points per game through 4 weeks. What Jonathan Taylor does is, you're right, Jeff. It takes some of that defensive attention off of Anthony Richardson, even, because I don't think teams are probably saying, okay, it's fine. Zach Moss, if you want Zach Moss to beat us, that's okay. And he hasn't been super efficient. If you add another yard per carry, which is like the bare minimum that I expect based on what this offense is and what Zach Moss is, if you add another yard per carry onto what has happened over the first 4 weeks, this offense is going to be explosive. I think it's already on that fringe. And I mean, Anthony Richardson is an EPA per play king right now. He's doing quite well. I mean, he's not a king, but like he's doing quite well in that regard. I think Jonathan Taylor comes in and opens up this offense to a whole new level. I think you're going to create more space for even guys like Josh Downs to work, and on the underneath stuff, because you're going to get linebackers that pull in on play action and things like that. So yeah, I mean, Jonathan Taylor to me is 100% a buy, because I still think that people have a depressed view of him in terms of what his fantasy outlook could be based on everything that happened this year. But also, there's still the report out there that he's not super happy with his situation, and we don't know how long he's going to be in Indianapolis. So the good thing is I think he's still a very talented back. I think we're going to see that for at least a few weeks, maybe before the trade deadline. He's somewhere else, but I also think he could come back, realize, oh yeah, we're going to win some games here, and maybe they will pay me after the season. So I mean, I pulled the trigger on that trade that I sent you guys last week. I sent Josh Jacobs in a first and I think a late second for Jonathan Taylor, and a third or something like that is what I got back. So it's a hefty price, but I think he's got RB2 upside. I don't think he's surpassing Christian McCaffrey personally.
Yeah. I mean, today, just to give context to everybody out there, he went straight up for Javonte Williams in a 12-team PPR, like straight up. Didn't have to give up any draft capital there. I love when Jeff gives me those eyebrows. Yes, Jeff, it's a real trade. I know it's not Jeff Bell trade because you're the master, Yoda, but it is some trades out there for, other people. Jonathan Taylor in a second for Deshaun Watson in Superflex. So somebody's getting off of Deshaun Watson. Maybe they have those quarterbacks. And so the market is still low for Jonathan Taylor. And I did say to Christian, I would do that deal as well. If you're a contender going for it, I think Taylor you could ride him as long as he stays healthy down the stretch. So there is that value. And he also went another deal, Jonathan Taylor and 2 firsts, a 24 and 25 first, and Jameson Williams. So that's 2 first and then Jameson Williams for Taylor. That's kind of some value around there. So it's really league dependent. Any last thoughts on Taylor, Jeff?
No, I mean, I just am excited to see him back. I think that
Yeah.
the Colts are more competitive than the expectation, and I think that South Division is wide open. I mean, the Houston Texans are very involved in it, and Tennessee, you can never write them off, and then Jacksonville's struggling to kind of come out the gate. I think everybody's at 2-2, I believe, right now.
Yeah. All right. Let's get over to my favorite subject, David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. So we're looking at how that usage has played out. Obviously, we felt it was pretty frustrating this last week. David Montgomery scored 3 touchdowns. What was his average per carry though? 2.7 or something like that. I believe it was like he fell forward and rolled. And he kind of fell into that Jamal Williams kind of load there, where they're using Gibbs like they didn't use Swift, and we're seeing Swift kind of have a resurgence. With the Eagles, he's looked really good. Now on the other side, Jahmyr Gibbs just hasn't scored the touchdowns. I think the biggest thing is the lack of touchdowns there, and I think that's the frustrations there. We had a lot of there were some comments made about how we shouldn't be complaining about this, and I think that's crap. This is fantasy football, and if we, if we like players and we're talking about how we on usage, you should be able to complain however the heck you want. This is what this is about. It's for fun. Now, don't take it too personal. I don't. I think it's hilarious that I got suckered into another Jahmyr Gibbs situation with DeAndre Swift, but I do think that he's still going to get used. I do think they love Monty though, and I think that they're going to just use him in the red zone. So that's something to note, that you're going to have to hope for a breakaway touchdown that we just haven't seen from Gibbs. And I think that's just the concern. You still start Gibbs every week though, in my opinion, and you take it because he's still getting usage and he's still, the targets. James Williams coming back, I think makes people a little bit nervous as well. But I still think he's a running back 3, floor, which is not necessarily something that you love. But if he scores a touchdown, he's still a running back 2.
I mean, the people that were valuing him as a 3rd-round pick in redraft, you're just wrong. I mean, I'm sorry, and you should have seen it coming.
Yeah, it's still week 5, so let's
you're wrong. It's unless David Montgomery gets hurt. I mean, they're doing we know what the Lions are. This is what they were last year, and they are using Gibbs more than DeAndre Swift was used. But you do hit a good point that it's really the touchdowns right now, and. But we do the draft stuff and we do the college stuff, and you saw Gibbs at Alabama, and he wasn't the type of player who's cutting it inside for 4 or 5 yards a pop to move the chains. He was getting bottled up at Alabama quite a bit, and then he would break off a long run that would shift the game, and so he has that ability. Now, some of that we've talked in the past about some of that game-breaking college ability, that 80-yard touchdown in college becomes that 50-yard touchdown where the safety has the speed and the better angle at the NFL, and it doesn't become quite that same level of splash play. I mean, if Devin Achane is getting run down on the sidelines, I think that Jahmyr Gibbs is also going to get run down on the sidelines, or Achane, I apologize there. But no, I think I understand the frustration there, but again, he is seeing usage. And one of the things that I said after the game was when they drafted him, when you looked at what the Lions looked like last year, so Jameson Williams is going to be out of the lineup. When you look at last year, they had Amon-Ra St. Brown, but then they closed the year with guys like Khalif Raymond, with Josh Reynolds that we're seeing, involving players like that, and they were really kind of searching for alternative receiving options. Well, they drafted Gibbs in the 1st round. After they made that pick, they drafted Sam Laporta. So their mind was in one place when they took Jahmyr Gibbs. They added Sam Laporta after that. And then we've seen Sam Laporta play very, very well and become really that second receiver in that offense. And that was unexpected. I think that was unexpected when they mailed the card in for Sam Laporta, when they took that selection of Jahmyr Gibbs. And that happens sometimes. I think that it's like Quentin Johnston with the Chargers is one that kind of stands out in my mind, where everybody kind of thought, well, he's going to be that first round pick. They're going to take that first round pick there. He's going to be their wide receiver 3 immediately. But then you get the guy in camp and he's a little bit rawer than maybe what you expect, or maybe another guy is just performing better. And so things are going to shift like that. And so I think that you get into a dangerous game when you say, well, first round draft capital, that means he's going to get this, because that doesn't take into account everything that happened in April in that first round pick coming in versus September 5th when the season starts. And you need to realize that there's 5 months of work that happened there, development within the team, and plans change sometimes. But I think you're right that the home run ability is definitely there with Gibbs. The receiving ability is there. Had he popped a touchdown or two, people would be a lot less upset. I think a lot of what it is we're reaching that point of the season where you're kind of realizing, like, I made a mistake on this and my team's struggling. We have an island game on a Thursday night game. David Montgomery was kind of questionable coming into that game, and then he just dominated the work show. It just was very unexpected. And so that led to just the perfect storm of social media nonsense.
Well, don't be fantasy snobs. Like, just don't be fantasy snobs. I can't stand fantasy snobs. And also, if I'm going to take the L on Jahmyr Gibbs, you're going to take the L on Calvin Ridley. But go ahead, Christian. Go.
Why are we ignoring game scripts? Like, the Lions aren't going to control every game. So
Sure.
they played the Falcons 2 weeks ago. The final score was 20-6, but the Lions had the game the entire way. The Lions went up quickly on the Packers. The Packers couldn't move the ball. In these game scripts, this is probably what we're going to see, and that should have been expected. I don't think that they want to run their rookie running back into the ground immediately, especially when he's not the type of player that you run into the ground. And I think that's something that Jeff was hitting on. But then you start to look at the schedule, like Panthers. Yeah, I mean, probably a Montgomery game. That's probably a Montgomery game. Bucks. No, that's probably going to be a Gibbs game. The one instance we have outside of week 1 against the Chiefs where I think maybe even the Lions were shocked to be in that and with an opportunity to win that.
Mm-hmm.
Gibbs wasn't going to be a big part of that week either way, I don't think. But the 1 week we have, the overtime loss to the Seahawks, Jahmyr Gibbs caught 7 balls, right? That game was never one way or another. It was a very close game the whole way through. So we've got, in 2 weeks, we've got the Buccaneers. 3 weeks, we've got the Ravens. Raiders have been, playing tough. I think the Lions can kind of,
spunky.
Yeah. Even with Aiden O'Connell out there fumbling the ball every other time. Then Chargers, there are games on the schedule that I think Jahmyr Gibbs is very startable. I personally, I say this Panthers week could be that week where they say, okay, we're getting comfortable with it. We might unleash him a little bit. We might scheme him up a little bit, but I don't know. You don't change anything. This Lions offense looks fantastic. And so I think anytime the Lions are heavily in control, I think we're going to see David Montgomery have massive games, and that's okay. 3 weeks ago, I talked about how Montgomery's still going to be a dynasty asset for as long as his contract is there, and as long as Ben Johnson's there. That's the other caveat. But yeah, I mean, the panic is a little crazy to me. He's still, I also mentioned the Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara usage in Kamara's rookie year, and how Ingram got a lion's share at the beginning of the year, and then it slowly turned to Kamara, or at least a split. I think we could see the same thing still. So panic meter very low for me. I'm cool. I'll go get Gibbs. If anyone in my leagues is panicking, hit me up. I'm ready. Let's trade.
Well, and I think it's very, one of the things that's getting washed over is that we got a data point with David Montgomery out of the lineup, and Gibbs was the featured back. It wasn't a situation where Gibbs kind of stayed in his role and Craig Reynolds kind of took the David Montgomery role. Gibbs was the featured back against the Atlanta Falcons. And so we have that data point there. They are comfortable using him as a feature back role. And that is huge, because David Montgomery long-term, there's questions about that. Obviously, at his age and production level, who knows what that's going to play out. And maybe they do get the Stan Campbell offense is probably going to have some hammer at some level. But if that shifts to somebody that's less productive, they are the path towards Alvin Kamara is very much there for Jahmyr Gibbs, I think.
Yeah, I guess I'm still on Gibbs train. I still think Gibbs has value. And just because you drafted Gibbs, let's say you did draft him in a redraft or whatever, even though it's a dynasty show, you definitely probably added some running backs later that have been able to replace that, production. You still have a talented guy where he's not. Gibbs probably will stay healthy, but Montgomery taking that load inside, like you're looking at a guy that's probably going to be healthy there. He's got to have the touchdown. It's like, I think if he does get those touchdowns, we're talking about a whole different scenario. All right, let's jump over to Jordan Addison, some rookie wide receivers, and Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Jordan Addison, goose egg, this in the last game. But, Kirk Cousins only threw 19 times. So I think that's something to note when you think of like who was out there. He did still run around in 73% of the dropbacks. So even though, he had one target, he obviously didn't produce out there. That's something to know. He does have a couple good games coming up, Chiefs and Bears. I mean, just play the Bears in terms of that defense, what that looking like. Chiefs have struggled, and you've seen those high scoring outputs there. Jaxon Smith-Njigba was a little bit more concerning because we've seen Addison produce, and we've seen that. We just haven't seen JSN out there, right? So, he's the seventh lowest rate in 11 personnel for him to be out there. So that's something to note there. He's only running around on 64% of Geno Smith's dropbacks. So we haven't seen that. Again, he's getting targets close to the line of scrimmage. He's not really getting those depth of targets that we've seen. It's at 2.4. That's his average depth of targets. That's something to know. So, like, which one are you more concerned with, Jeff?
I'm not concerned with either of them, to be honest. I think that we were very spoiled last year with the rookie production and we saw those guys, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, they went higher in the NFL draft. And I think that there's a very real difference. I mean, it might not seem like it as you're watching it on Thursday night, but I think there's a big difference between players that go inside the top 10 of the NFL draft versus guys that come closer to 20-ish. And so I think that there's a tier that happens there. Teams recognize that. The other thing is these players are stepping into situations where Justin Jefferson is going to draw the volume with the Vikings, and Jaxon Smith-Njigba, we know DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett's going to draw the volume with the Seahawks. And they're not playing. Neither of these guys are playing in 11 personnel. And Christian made a great point talking about Jahmyr Gibbs, but game script favored the Vikings for the first time this year, and Addison just wasn't really on the field all that much because they had two tight ends out there. They spent so much money on Josh Oliver in the offseason, and then having TJ Hawkinson as well. That's how, with their struggles of their offensive line, and that's the common connector between these two rookies, outside of them just being rookies. Both of these teams are struggling with their offensive line. And so both of them are playing more 12 personnel in order to get more blockers on the field to try to attempt to run the ball. And so both of these rookies are the odd man out. Now, the reason why Addison has been able to have some splash plays is passing volume and game scripts have favored the Vikings to be throwing the ball a lot more than the Seahawks, but Addison has been striking downfield more, whereas Jaxon Smith-Njigba has been kind of that short outlet receiver. So Addison's been able to have some splash plays, and so I think that people have gotten lulled a little bit on Addison because when you look at the numbers outside of this past week, they looked fine overall because he was getting a long touchdown every single week, but he's not getting the volume, just like Jaxon Smith-Njigba's not getting the volume. Long term, that's going to change. Tyler Lockett's not going to be a Seahawk forever. KJ Osborne might not be a Viking after this year. And so they're going to step into those, I think Devonta Smith type role is a good way to say it, opposite of the AJ Brown in the offense. And we've seen there's plenty of ceiling there for production.
Yeah. Once again, we're in week 5, folks. It's okay that the rookies aren't starting hot. And I know there's some discussion out there, like what's more important, their college profile and their draft capital or what they've put on film for the first 4 weeks. Probably everything we know about, first round wide receivers. I don't think we're going to have 3 first round receivers from this class that are just absolute busts. I really don't think so. It's very rare that happens. We know what type of prospects these two were. I think fantasy managers had an unrealistic expectation for Jaxon Smith-Njigba. I went back and forth with a few people and I said, I think Tyler Lockett's still, probably better than the incoming rookie that hasn't played football in a year. And I think that some people expected that switch to happen. And I think when you look at what he did in college, you can understand why someone might have thought that. However, That's not the case. And so what do we do with this new information? We buy those players. We see all this panic. We understand what Dynasty is. And so my advice to you would be, let's go buy these players that everyone's panicking on, especially in rebuilds. I don't think you can count on either one of these players becoming a mainstay in your lineup every single week if you're a contender. But I also think that there's a world in which the back half of this year, Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf get hurt. Justin Jefferson goes down. Hopefully not. Hopefully none of this happens. But those things happen, and then that's when opportunities strike, and that's when you should go, be proactive. Don't wait for that time, because then the price goes up. And so I am calm this week because everyone else is panicking, and I'm relaxed. I'm going to go get these players that everyone's panicking on, that I am pretty confident will still be good players in the NFL.
You are calm. We got calm Christian out here. Just calm. You go in there. Yeah, I think I think that you just looking at it from this perspective. I think JSN needs to produce those soon. Like I think we're looking at I would love for that offense to scheme him the ball. I just don't think they're scheming him the ball. Like I just and that'd be nice to see him earn those targets. Where Addison, he's been able to break those. Again, if JSN was number 2, I think he'd be looking really good right now. I think that DK kind of just like with Justin Jefferson, Addison there. I think the Tyler Lockett thing, you look at his contract, I don't know if they're necessarily out of that next year. So I think that's the other area that I'd be a little bit more concerned about. All right, real quick, we're going to run through some hidden targets that we might like in Dynasty, talking about these guys. Jeff, you just tell me of this group, you can run through them if you want, or just maybe a couple of them that you think maybe you should be maybe targeting.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting, kind of the shift in where things have gone. And so we saw Sean Tucker struggle the first couple weeks, and the Buccaneers involved Keyshawn Vaughn more in that secondary role behind Rachaad White this past week. But the one from last night, we saw a putrid offense by the New York Giants last night, but they have to involve Wan'Dale Robinson, which they did early in the game, and Jalen Hyatt, and he was getting more action as well. They need to. This is quickly becoming a lost year for the New York Giants, and so they need to involve these 2 young wide receivers to get them comfortable, to understand what they are able to do in their games, and stop giving the reps to Darius Slayton. Is a fine receiver, but if you're going to be heading towards a top 5 draft pick, you do not need to be running Darius Slayton out there at the expense of Wan'Dale Robinson and Jalen Hyatt. You need to get these guys reps and development, and along with that will come the fantasy production. We've seen, you flash back to week 2, the Jalen Hyatt long catch against the Cardinals. That's unteachable things. That there's a lot that needs to be taught in Jalen Hyatt's game. His ability to track the ball there, get open downfield, you can't teach that, and there are a few players that can do that. And so these are guys that I think are great targets towards, especially right now, probably because people are freaked out about the Giants after Monday Night Football. So these are great targets to go out there and try to buy on the low right now, because I do think they're going to get more involved.
For what it's worth, Wan'Dale Robinson, 64% of snaps in his second game. So really good. He was second highest among the receivers. Jalen Hyatt, 60%, third most among the receivers. Darius Slayton is the one up at 88%. I'm a little shocked. Isaiah Hodgins came way down. So I think that Hyatt's going to take Hodgins' spot in that lineup. But I also could see a world, because Hodgins was like the one dude that was kind of productive. I think he caught 2 balls, which was productive for that offense that night. But that it's interesting to me. The other guy I want to mention from the group we have listed here, Rashee Rice. I think there's certainly a lot of receivers in Kansas City right now. I think the one that has been productive-ish every week in terms of, so we go back to Sunday Night Football. I think Rashee Rice had one of his nice long catches called back for a penalty. I can't remember exactly. You look at what he did against the Bears 2 weeks ago, though. He's the guy that's finding the zone in the middle of the field, and he is one of those guys that gets immediately upfield and creates after the catch, which is something that we didn't see a whole lot of from him in college, but you could see kind of the mold of that being there. His snap shares, so 31% week 1, 18% week 2, came way down, 51%, 46%. Yeah, he was 4th on the team. Justin Watson still running out there. Marquez Valdez-Scantling still running out there. But I think there's something to be said about Patrick Mahomes not really trusting any of the guys. And in big moments, I think we've seen him look to Rashee Rice a little bit. We've seen him sometimes look to Sky Moore, and it hasn't always worked out. So I wonder when that transition happens. But Rashee Rice still pretty dampened value out there in Dynasty. So go get him.
Yeah, I was gonna highlight Rashid as well. Just this last game, he had a 17% target share, 5 targets. That led all non-Travis Kelce receivers. So when you think of that, like he was in there, 6 red zone targets all season too. So like he has seen that. He had 3 targets in the red zone this last game. Like you guys mentioned with the target share, 32% target rate per route run. So that's good. Like when he's out there, he's running target. He's getting targeted by Patrick Mahomes, and it's weird. I do feel like he's kind of made I don't know if he's leapfrogged Sky Moore, but he's definitely producing in a better way than Sky Moore has. And I think if you're looking and you're saying, hey, maybe this could be that guy that we've been looking for in this offense, or she could be that. I think his price point is depreciated. Like I still think that you can go out there and grab him. I can't believe someone put Jonnu Smith on this show sheet. Just Kyle Pitts. Just had to say Kyle Pitts out there. But yeah, so I do think that there's targets there. I mentioned Keyshawn Bond, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, those guys in that area. All right, well, I think that's the show.
Yep. And the full version of every show can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. Be sure to head over there and subscribe to the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show.